Hello, everyone. Welcome to this TeamPeds Experts live talk on healthy screen time for kids. My name is Dr. Liz Hutson, and I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner who has worked with pediatric populations across the lifespan. The focus of my research is social media, technology, and screen time in kids. I started by practicing in the adolescent population, but now have moved actually into the perinatal mental health space and young adults. So it's been an interesting pivot to see the screen time needs across the lifespan. And I'm also careful to frame it as screen time needs because in this day and age, whether we like it or not, screens are everywhere. All that being said, the other reason that I'm an expert on this topic is I have the lived experience of it. I'm a mom to three children, ages 10, 8, and 3. So, where the ages of my clinical population kind of end, then the ages of my actual children's ages begin. So I have this experience of trying to create that balance of healthy screen time in my own family. Therefore, the purpose of this Teen Peds talk will be balance, not perfection. This is about helping families create healthy habits, not creating more parent guilt. So I'm going to be talking about some different resources, and I believe those resources are going to be dropped into the chat. But feel free to click on those as we're going through it so you can kind of explore it as I explain some of the different resources to help you create healthy screen time for your kids and for your patients. I would like to say too, I am not paid by any of these resources, but they're just ones that I've recommended as a clinician, but then I also use as a parent. Okay, so the first thing that we really do need to cover in any talk on screen time in kids, whether it's healthy, not healthy, any of the things, are what are the official recommendations for screen time. I have watched over the past like more than decade as we've shifted away from focus on the quantity or the time that we are on screen time, but we focus more on the quality of what we're doing on screen time. That being said, I know that it's helpful as a parent to kind of sometimes give those numbers. So I'm going to talk about the American Academy of Pediatrics, their guidelines on kind of quantities, and it's going to be really rough, and I'm only going to give a few because, again, I don't want anybody to focus too much on numbers. But under about 18 months to a year, the recommendation is really no screen time in kids aside from video chatting. Video chatting is okay because that's promoting connection. And especially, we all lived through the pandemic. That was a really pivotal way for us to be able to connect with family and friends, not just ones who are far away, but even the ones who are next door who maybe we just couldn't see. 18 months to about 2 years, we're going to want to focus on high quality programming viewed together with the child. Avoid just allowing the child to kind of sit and use the media themselves because, first of all, they're not going to be super good at clicking and then they're going to exit out of it quickly. But also, if they do click on something, it could be questionable what they end up getting into. 2 to 5 year olds, ideally less than 1 hour a day, but we don't live in a perfect world. And there are times when certainly my children, and I, again, 3-year-old, where he may watch more than 1 hour a day. But the focus should be on high quality programming. And we'll talk about what I mean with high quality programming later on, but things that are created by experts in child development. Keep television and other media out of the bedroom in these ages too, and avoid screen time within 1 hour of bedtime. 6 and older. So we've kind of lumped in school age children and adolescents together, but for children those ages, it's really recommended to adopt an individualized family media plan. And so that's one of the resources that you guys will have access to. I don't think I can see the chat in here, but that's one of the ones that I would really recommend to every family. I even was thinking to myself, goodness, it's about to be summer. Perfect time for this talk because screen time is about to go wild. But I want to update my own family's media plan to make sure that we've got a good plan for summer and everyone knows what the rules and boundaries are. I'll talk more about the family media plan soon. So I always like to start these kind of talks by talking about the benefits of screens because I think that it's very easy for us all to just kind of see the negatives, right? Because there's a lot of negatives, and that's the clickbait stuff that you will see, is that it's easy to like use scare tactics for families and talk about the negatives. But there are some benefits. And again, I'm going to really approach this talk considering the fact that we're about to get into summer and what are some of the cool things about screens. So there's a lot of learning opportunities. When it comes to screen time in kids, there are actually some really great learning opportunities out there. So summer is a time when inevitably kids' screen time is going to go up as they're missing the structure of school. And it's easy. We all, even as adults, grab our phone and start just scrolling when we're given free time. There are more structured learning opportunities online if you kind of seek them out. There's a lot of paid opportunity, like, ones that you can pay for your kids, like OutSchool is a great resource. But then there's a lot of free ones out there when you kind of dig around a little bit more. I know I'm located in Hawaii, and we have, when I look through some of the resources that I can find, some free resources on like coding and STEM activities for kids where they log in synchronously at certain times. There's lots of reading programs, especially too. A lot of libraries have online programs that you can look for, and even just at a minimum, summer reading programs where kids can log onto the app and track their reading time, track the books that they read, win prizes. I know a lot of different state library systems have those. So, when we're thinking about the learning activities online, the phrase I want you to remember is focusing on creation over consumption. Are kids using the screen time in a way that's creative versus just kind of passively watching something? Not that there's wrong with passively watching, we all are going to do it, and I'll talk about ways to do that too. But when we think about learning activities, creation over consumption. Social connection is another huge benefit of screens. First, it's important to know that AAP has said video chatting is okay at all ages, as I mentioned. But eventually, kids will want to chat with their friends versus grandma, right? Peer relations are a really important part of growing up. So consider early what you as a parent want that to look like. That's something that I talk to families about, especially when their kids are getting to, my 8 and 10-year-old age of like, are they going to be allowed to talk to their friends? Are they messaging with them? Are they FaceTiming with them? How are they communicating with them? And, one thing that I found that escalates quickly is more people get added to the group chats that they had. And you might have approved them to talk to these friends, but then other friends get added to the group chat. And this is where the family media plan is going to come in. The family media plan from the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's a website that you go to. You can do it on your phone, on a desktop device, and you pick and choose rules for your family based on your kids' ages that you want to consider adding to your family's media plan. It's meant for the whole family to create it together, for the kids and parents to sit down and put together this plan of what are our family's rules going to be. So consider, who can your child talk to online? Do they need to get your approval to start talking to someone new? I know that, depending on the device, if your child has their own device, it may ask you if you want to add people and add contacts and different things. So it is a lot of work as a parent, but it's the same as if we were sending our kids out to the mall. Back in the 80s, 90s, you send your kid to the mall unsupervised. So what are all the rules that you want to put in around that? Let's see. I would be remiss too, as a PMHNP who's worked with kids, to just consider as a parent too, this is one of the doom and gloom things, but you want to be able to kind of see who your kids are talking to online, because it can be a really slippery slope, right? It starts with talking to their friends, but then it can kind of turn into talking to other people, and then eventually talking to maybe people they don't even know and chatting, and somehow people get added to different things. Keep in mind too, kids socializing on screens isn't just happening within like messages or FaceTime or things like that. It can happen on Roblox. It can happen on certainly on any of the other social media sites, but there's just a lot of different social opportunities, some good, some not so good. So consider who your kid might be talking to online and set up those rules and boundaries as soon as they get a device or as soon as they start using some of these different apps. A little bit more about the good too, though, creativity and entertainment. Last year, I had a high school student who needed to get some internship credit in, and she wanted to do something related to mental health. And I was like, ooh, I'm going to take this opportunity. I need you to do a project for me on what do young people do online. And so she really took it and ran with it. She did a survey of her friends and then put together a presentation for me. And so granted, this is, one high schooler and her survey of her friends, but still, she got a pretty good big group of people. And what made me laugh about her presentation is that she said, we're just using YouTube for crafting. And that cracked me up because, YouTube gets a bad reputation. And I'm not going to say that YouTube is an app that I'm going to let my kids use without my supervision, but YouTube does allow for a lot of creativity. It's where you can watch cooking videos, travel videos. I mean, there's a lot of how-to things out there, and I know we all use it when something breaks down in our house and we have to figure out what to do. So harness the creativity in the educational content with your kids. So let's talk a little bit about YouTube. YouTube is a tricky app. It really technically is social media, right? Because there is the interactive component to it where people can comment on things, like things. So it does have that interactive stuff. But it's also videos that have advertisements, and unless you have different paid versions of it. So remember, as many of us were kids who grew up in those 80s, 90s times, that they used to have laws and rules around what kind of content for advertisements could be on at certain times. YouTube doesn't necessarily have that. So you might get an ad for alcohol, you might get an ad for a bra, you might get an ad for different, like, kind of questionable content, and sometimes just completely inappropriate content as your kid is watching different videos. So it's something to know that, like, YouTube, you can, even if your kid is watching a video that you think is innocent, the advertisement cannot be so innocent. So YouTube decided to kind of combat this problem by creating YouTube Kids, it's a different option. I don't know that I would necessarily say that it's a better option. One of the challenges with YouTube Kids is, while it does filter out the inappropriate content, or at least it tries its best to, it doesn't mean that it's high quality content on YouTube Kids. So sometimes I hear parents, feeling like, well, they're using YouTube Kids, so it's okay. But remember, there's still this level of high quality content. And when I say that, I'm really thinking about, like, at lower levels, things like Sesame Street. Anything on PBS is really high quality content because it was developed by pediatric experts, where they really thought about what kind of content do the kids need to learn, how can we display it in kid-friendly ways to get them engaged. But importantly, I always think about Sesame Street in particular, and how, there was this concern that some children's programming was causing ADHD because the quick changes between topics. So Sesame Street lengthened the amount of time that each of its segments is. So if you're going to let your kids kind of have free reign of watching something, that consumption versus creativity, I would try to make sure that it's high quality, and YouTube Kids are not going to be it. Now, that being said, again, YouTube still can be used for good things, but it's probably best that the parents are, up until a certain point, co-viewing it with their kids. So that's actually my next topic, is co-viewing as one of the benefits of screen time in kids. Now, and this is where I like to start this talk. When I'm giving this talk to parents as a clinician, I say, I'm a busy parent. I work full time. I have 3 kids. I do not always sit down and watch things with my kids, but I do sometimes. And when I do, I like to treat it the way that we treat reading books with kids. I'm also going to check for comprehension. So I'm going to ask questions about it. So, what do you think about when so and so did that? Or what's going on there? Or how would you do this? There was a study done actually at Texas Tech that looked at Daniel Tiger, and it had parents co-view Daniel Tiger with their children, and they found that that helped to solidify the social and emotional learning that was being taught within Daniel Tiger. So it's not just about watching Daniel Tiger, it's about teaching those life lessons inherent with it. Any elementary teacher will talk about it's not just about reading, it's about reading comprehension. So co-viewing helps you to kind of see and ask those questions. Let's see. So then, when we think about co-viewing, it's easy to think about what that means as far as like watching things. But then as kids age, co-viewing can mean playing on apps with your kids, experimenting on Gen AI with your kids. Again, like ChatGPT and Claude and all the other kinds of generative AI. They can be scary, or we can choose to kind of embrace it a little bit. And how can we use it? Because our kids are going to eventually be using it. So how can we use it with them, or teach them about it, but then teach them also kind of the pitfalls of it too, because it's not perfect. But my kids have been into like creating a song in the style of Taylor Swift about whatever it may be about. So there are some cool ways that you can use and co-view and co-use some of the different screens with your kids, especially as they age. Okay. So we are going to talk a little bit about the bad of screens. So the things that you want to kind of be watchful for are sleep, eating, and displacement. So first, we know that the bright light from screens can interfere with our body's melatonin synthesis. So if we're looking at screens late at night and then we try to go to sleep, our brain has just gotten a lot of input that said, don't go to sleep, don't go to sleep. I'm looking at the sun right now. Why would I go to sleep? The bright light is going to do the same thing that the sun does in telling our brain to stay awake. So that's where the recommendation of no screens an hour before bed. I even will talk to kids, if you need to be like listening to something, then put your phone down, put it upside down, and listen to music, listen to a podcast, listen to a TV show. Don't watch that TV show if that's what you need before bed. Same goes for adults. So that's sleep. Screen time while eating, that can be a problem because it can lead to mindless eating rather than mindful eating. So studies throughout the years, even before like screens and tablets, found that if you're passively eating while watching TV, you're more likely to eat more. So because it's just kind of that like habit. So you want to be watchful of screens while eating. But we don't want screen time to displace our other healthy activities that kids should be doing. So there's this displacement theory when it comes to screens, of like screens displacing the other things that we're doing. And so that's where the recommendation to not have screens at meals comes from as well. Meal times are meant to be our opportunity to talk with our kids, to see how their day was, to kind of let things come out that maybe wouldn't normally come out if everybody was kind of locked into their screens. I've heard the same thing too when we think about sitting in cars. I will say today, it took me about an hour and a half to get to my kids' school today. There was a lot of different like traffic and accidents and different things. And so we listened to podcasts, but then I would stop kind of in between to see, what will they kind of talk to me and say? Because my kids are at the point where they're not going to answer my questions with more than just a few words, but kind of allowing for that natural conversation. So don't let screen time displace the healthy activity. I will say though, screens can be an asset and you can have healthy screen time, especially while traveling with kids. You might want to think about though in advance, like what kind of content do you want them to have? If you've got a really long car trip or a really long plane trip, what do you want them to be doing when they're going to be on that screen for a long period of time? It's also important to talk about the warning signs with too much screen time. So there's no, again, I don't want to frame it as there's any kind of limit for the amount of time that someone is on a screen, but there have been studies that have found that kids who use screens for more than 3 times a day can have, there's a link between the amount of screen time and symptoms of depression and anxiety. Certainly it can cause some hits to self-esteem and confidence. And then we'll talk a little bit about attention in a bit. But some of the warning signs that maybe the screen time is becoming too much for the child is, are they having a hard time disconnecting? And this can mean like temper tantrums when they're told to turn it off, not being able to turn it off, sneaking it, which is something, and remember, every kid is different too. Again, my lived experience, I've got one kid who can turn it off when I ask them to, and then one kid who, I have to give warnings of, we're going to finish it at this next episode. Um, Comments related to their self-esteem is another big warning sign, like so and so has these clothes or everyone else wears this type of thing. And so it's that social comparison. Remember, we all deal with that, right? When we see that's, we've been dealing with this since magazines and TV shows were coming out, where we would see people having different things than us. But now it's happening like right in our hands at all times. And it's hard enough as an adult sometimes to remember, like, oh, they're just taking a picture of this nice area of their house, or they're wearing it, their photoshopped faces and all these things. But for teenagers and for kids, they don't necessarily understand that. And so it takes a long time for that really to sink in, despite parents and everyone telling them. So that's one of the dangers of like social media in particular, is just the social comparison. But for screen time in general, are there frequent, persistent requests to use the screens, whining, crying, tantrums? Um, is there inability to reduce the use despite warnings or despite being asked by parents? Secretive behavior around device use. One of my kids knew, if she snuck into my room in the morning before I woke up, she could grab my phone really quickly. So kids, I like to reframe that as like, kids are really smart. They know how to manipulate the environment, but are they starting to sneak and things like that? Risky behavior online, sexting, online gambling, sharing personal information with strangers. Again, these are things that, even with all of the boundaries and precautions, it it can happen and kids can make an impulsive decision and do something. But the best thing that we can do as parents is to talk about it now, when kids are getting the phone, when they're getting these devices, setting up the rules and boundaries with a family media plan. Now, a question that I actually get asked a lot, and I think it's important to talk about, but it's also important to acknowledge that we're in a bit of a chicken and egg situation, and that we're not sure which one came first and we're not sure which one caused which. But let's talk about attentional difficulties and screen time. Of course, it's easy to blame the rise of ADHD in kids on screens, just like it was, again, going back to the 80s, 90s, when kids were watching more TV. The current evidence does indicate that it indicates that screen time does not clearly cause ADHD, but it is associated with ADHD symptoms through like a statistically significant, moderate, likely bidirectional relationship. So all of that's a fancy way to say that maybe it's the screen time and it's excessive screen time use. I'm not talking about kids who are using it within kind of those lower level parameters, but excessive screen time use and ADHD do go hand in hand. But the other part of it is, do children with some of these like neurodevelopmental differences seek out screen time for whatever reason that may be? Do those kids prefer screen time as an activity, um, like as the activity of choice? So let me just talk about some of the research in that area just to see, and hopefully this helps kind of clear things up a little bit. So there was a landmark longitudinal study that was published in JAMA that followed about 2,500 adolescents without baseline ADHD symptoms over 24 months. And they found that each additional high frequency digital media activity, so like any kind of additional app, game, whatever they were doing online, digital media activity, was associated with a 10% higher odds of subsequent ADHD symptoms. Students with no high frequency media use had about a 4%, almost 5% rate of ADHD symptoms at follow-up. So it is a bit higher. So each like additional high frequency media use does correlate to a bit of a higher risk of ADHD. But again, I'm sorry, and I shouldn't have even said correlate, or no, I should say correlate, but remember that correlation does not imply causation. So is it that kids with these things are seeking out more media time? The American Academy of Pediatrics 2026 technical report notes that children with ADHD symptoms at age 6 were more likely to engage in heavy gaming 1 year later. But the reverse, that gaming worsened ADHD symptoms, was not supported. So it wasn't necessarily that like gaming was causing the ADHD, but maybe that kids with ADHD prefer gaming as an activity. So again, chicken and egg. Let's talk about brain structural changes. So there have been some studies that found, again, that link between ADHD symptoms and screen time, and specifically through reduced cortical thickness. So this is one of the things that it's not diagnostic for ADHD by any means, but we do see differences in cortical thickness at different ages of typically developing kids and atypically developing kids. Ultimately, though, the displacement of protective activities might be where where some of these kind of links are coming from. So it might not be that it's the screen time causing the attentional symptoms, but the fact that screen time takes up so much of the awake time that the kids have, that then they're not spending their time outside, playing, engaging with family members, sleeping, eating, and doing those things. So it might just be that the screen time is displacing the other healthy activities. Okay, so I hope that I know that probably doesn't answer the question of does screen time cause ADHD, because I just don't think that we have any idea just yet. But no, there is a definite link, and it's more for the excessive amounts of screen time, but it may be as a result of the screen time displacing the other healthy activities that kids need to do. And that's why, again, as we approach summer, think of a screen time plan for your family and what do you want it to look like, because if left with no plan, it's so easy to fall into like lots of screen time. Okay, so some of the practical parenting strategies that I like to share, and again, you can find these in the AAP Family Media Plan, creating these screen-free times and zones, whether that be mealtime, bedtime, or certain family activities. I am very lucky to live in Hawaii, and we hike and go to the beach a lot. And naturally, those activities lead to less screen time because I don't want to get sand in my phone. But also, when we're out on a hike, I need to be able to see where I'm going and where I'm stepping. So figure out, when are those times going to be where no one is on their phone, parents included, because we need to role model for our kids when to use and not use a phone. Use the parental controls appropriately. So if and when your kid gets a device, unfortunately, not to create more work on parents, but you do need to spend some time looking through the apps, figuring things out. There are so many guides out there. Like all of the different social media apps have guides. Like Instagram has a great parent guide for their child using Instagram. But definitely, if you purchase an Apple product, it comes with a lot of parental controls. A lot of the other like Fire, Amazon products come with different parental controls, but you do have to look into them and figure out which ones you want to put on. There's school time, for example, is a great one where the kid can't use the screen during school time. Let's say that they have a watch and they wear that to school. They can't use it during school hours. Another tip is to make sure to always prioritize those healthy activities first. So maybe the rule is going to be No screen time until after breakfast in the summer. No screen time till after lunch in the summer. No screen time till after dinner. Make it whatever you want it to be. So thinking about when when are you going to make those rules and what do you want your kids to be doing instead? So maybe they have to go outside and play, maybe they have to read a book, whatever it is before they get their screen time. Keep the communication open instead of overly punitive. Like I said at the very beginning of this talk, screen time's here to stay. Technology's here to stay. So kids are going to want to use it. So keep that communication open so that you can figure out what is it that your kids even want to do online. Like my adolescent who worked with me on that project, she's like, I wish my parents just knew that I'm going on to YouTube for crafting. So there are some positive things about it. So I know it's easy as a parent to just like lump all screen time into this thing and roll our eyes and not want to let the kids do it, but keep that communication open and maybe you'll find out that they're doing something really cool on there. Maybe they're doing coding, robotics, lots of great stuff. Again, the red flags: sleep disruption, eating disruption, significant irritability when screens are removed, declining grades, functioning, social withdrawal, social comparison, self-esteem issues. These all can be the big red flags that screen time is getting to be too much. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to talk about today, this is a talk on healthy screen time. But I'd be remiss if I didn't discuss some of the things that are happening in the news with screen time and specifically with social media. So some of the European countries have started to create social media bans for certain ages. Australia did theirs, I think it was in 2024. So social media bans are difficult, right? We already know, even in the US, that a lot of the different social media platforms have age restrictions on them. But anybody can get around that, right? And say that they're above 13 years old or say that they're older than whatever age the app says. So it's going to be really difficult to ever enact social media bans, but do know that other countries are trying. So it's kind of something that you may want to just consider. The reasons that they're banning it is because we're seeing such strong consequences with depression and anxiety. I mean, even I now work in more outpatient settings, but when I used to work in more inpatient settings, which was quite a while ago, the amount of kids that we would see come in for suicidal ideation related to they sexed a picture one time and then it got sent to the whole school, or they did something one time and it just got repeated because it's social media. So I think that the concerns for that and the impulsive nature of children and adolescents, it's really there. So I don't know that social media bans are necessarily going to fix everything because it's easy for people to get around bans, but know that that is something that's happening in different countries. There are a few states that have passed similar laws restricting minors' social media access, but again, kids can lie and say that they're whatever age that they are. There are some school-based like phone bans, watch bans, and different things like that. But then, I can even say as a parent, it becomes difficult when kids are at school and we do face issues with school shootings and being able to get a hold of our kids. So it's a tricky thing for schools and professional organizations to kind of advocate for like a total ban of it. We know in general total bans of things doesn't always work out super well. So it's probably better to have that open communication. Okay, so that is a lot of what I wanted to talk to you about today with healthy screen time with kids. Just to kind of summarize, I really want everyone to strive for balance, not perfection. We don't live in a perfect world. Connection matters more than these super strict rules. But rules are important. We know that from kids, they need structure and boundaries and able to best thrive in the world. Healthy screen habits start with healthy family routines. Kids are not going to come to you and put themselves on a routine. You're going to need to do it. So really, as we get close to summer, think about what that routine is going to look like for your family. Small changes can make a big difference. You know, for me, one of the smallest changes that I made was I turned off autoplay on some like Netflix and different things so that the shows wouldn't just keep playing, because then it's always, oh, let me finish this episode. So like even just that small change made it so much easier for me to like say one episode versus one episode turns into five. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. I hope that you learned a lot about screens and kids. I'm going to see, I'm not sure if I can see the chat in here right now, but I hope that this was helpful.